Hey everyone, TJB Chris here. Welcome back to the channel. It is part 4 in my saga to get the card cage for the TRS-80 Model 12 designed and in. And tonight should be the culmination of it, asterisk. There probably will be a part 5 when I get my hands on the Tandy Emeritus backplane, but that won't be until sometime well into 2024. And I will do that because I know you all really want to watch me solder 560 individual solder joints, and that's just for the 7 80-pin card cage slots. That doesn't even count all the passive components and everything else. But it will be a fun time. I enjoy doing those assembly videos, so that will be coming. But until then, this will button up the project. We have 3 main sections in tonight's video. First off, we're going to have a card cage bake-off. I have 2 different builds here of my cage from 2 different providers on the interwebs, and we're going to take a look at those. And then we're going to go through and solve the power connector problem. This is just off camera here. But if I lift this up, there's the power connector. And right there where my thumb is pinking the board, we need to extend that up to the backplane while also powering the motherboard. And finally, we're going to assemble the card cage and put it into the machine and try it out. That's tonight's plan. So stick with me. I hope you enjoy this. And tonight you're actually going to get to see something you haven't seen since part 1, and that's the Model 12 actually work. So, but all this computer stuff for not a lot of computer activity, we're going to fix that tonight. All right, let's get to the card cage bake-off. And here we are, 2 different examples of my same card cage printed from 2 different providers. And what I've done here, this is not an apples-to-apples comparison because I intentionally did these in 2 different leagues in terms of cost and expected quality. And the reason for that is because I'd like to be able to see, is it worth your money getting a really fancy print or is it not? And I mean, I guess that's going to depend on what you're doing with it. But I have 2 different contenders here. So in this corner up front here, we have a cage I had printed. I bid out on CraftCloud. And I used not the cheapest provider. In fact, I used a slightly more expensive, not the bottom or the next to the bottom. This cage was $42 for the 3 parts. That was before shipping. And then it was about 13 bucks or so shipped. So this cage it came in a Target box that was obviously reused from, I'm sure, some dude's address in Kansas. But the cool thing about that is there's a lot of folks on CraftCloud from dudes like me with 3D printers that are going to sell some time on them to make the money back a little bit or make them do something when we're not using them, all the way up to professional folks and print houses and manufacturers. So you've got your choice with CraftCloud. And I went with kind of a more manageable middle-of-the-road option, hoping that what I could do is say, if this was good enough for, being on the inside of the machine and you're not a part you're going to really interact with much once you get it together, then why spend too much money? But it's worth comparing. And then on the other end, we have what I'm going to call, at least for the cost, the Cadillac of card cages, and that is one I had made at Shapeways. This one was $299 before shipping, but shipping was free. And there are some distinct differences between these cages. So we're going to take a look at the quality of these parts. We're going to take a look at the overall finish. We're going to take a look at fitment for the screw holes and things like that. And then we're going to kind of get a verdict and see which one I'm going to put in my machine. Not here is my 3D printer. I did have a set run for my 3D printer, but I actually shipped it off to someone. So that set is already in someone else's hands and actually falls, in my mind, somewhere between the CraftCloud cage that I had and the Shapeways one. All right, let's look at the CraftCloud cage. Okay, first up, the CraftCloud cage, and let's take a look at what we have here. So taking a look at the left side of the cage first. So when I say left and right, folks, by the way, I'm saying left as though I'm looking at the back of the Model 12 as though I were looking into the card cage. Right side, of course, is on the right, and top is on the top. See, there we go. Now we have an orientation established. So let's take a closer look at this cage. Now, first off, you can see here we've got a bit of a texture in here. You can see a texture in the material here, and that's pretty emblematic of 3D printing. And one interesting thing about this, my printer doesn't do this, at least not the way I've sliced it. Come on, camera, pick that up. Is you can kind of see there's a definite edge to this. Mine doesn't do that. And it does it on the screw and mount holes too. So this is the fan screw hole, and these are the PCB guide mounts. And it's definitely got this little circular artifact around it. And I've seen mine printed, but this is more overt. But either way, it certainly looks like it should do the job. I actually have a screw here. We'll see, does it pass the fitment test? And yes, it does. So it doesn't matter. It holds up perfectly. The dimensions of the hole are correct, so it doesn't really matter. Actually, let's do one more other thing. Let's drop a PCB guide in there and see if I can just snap one of these holes in there. And that should give me a pretty good idea. These things snap in a little hard sometimes, but nope, it goes in. So yep, it's meant to be a tight fit. They're meant to snap in. So that's excellent. And of course, we have the fan cut out here. Let's see if I can get my name in view here. Okay, there's my name. It's fairly decent quality. Looks pretty good, actually. Got pretty good resolution on there. Now let's take a look at the back. The part that mates up with the backplane. You can see my elongated holes here. They have nice definition. Look very good. My supports are on there very nicely. That looks very good. Overall, I mean, again, this is the $42 one. It's very nice. One thing I did notice, the holes for the top are a little, my camera's not liking this, are a little oblong, but they are cut in there correctly, and they look to be the correct diameter. I can drop a screw in there if I need to see. But overall, I'm pretty happy with this part. The outside edge of it's this really cool texture, by the way. That looks very nice. So, I mean, overall, it's a quality part. For 42 bucks, I'm really happy with it. I think it's well made. Like I say, the little bit of textures is new, but that's probably just a setting for the printer or whatever printer the person that made it was using. Similarly, looking at the right-hand side of the cage, again, we have, I don't think you're going to be able to see my name printing on here, and I can't get, there we go. There's my name. Camera doesn't love that, but there's my name. Looks good. Holes have nice definition. The through holes for the PCB guides similarly are nicely round, have good definition. There's less of a texture on this one because this one prints in this orientation, while this one here prints on its back. So that kind of just explains the difference there. And of course, the chassis guide on the right side, we've got the nice cutouts for the screws, all oblong and nice. And overall, this is a high quality part. I'll get a total weight. Oh, let's get a look at the top here. And of course, a look at the top here. We've got a similar thing. This was printed on flat, so you can see the surrounds around the screw holes. Nothing big there. They're the correct dimensions. My name is fairly decent. It's, you know, pretty damn good. I couldn't get my old printer to do that. And of course, on the back, we have that really cool texture pattern that comes with, I guess, probably an artifact of the guy's print bed. I say guy's, the person's print bed. So that is actually it. It works fairly well. It's well built. I'm going to try and shove the screw in here. The screw fits into the slot there. So overall, this is what $42 will buy you, and it's excellent. Honestly, it's a very good cage for 42 bucks. And if you were going to have this printed out, it seems to be pretty well constructed and done. So, and again, there's different suppliers. It depends on who you order from, but you'll get a bunch of selections of bids. And CraftCloud is interesting in that it's kind of a broker between you and a whole bunch of 3D printing services. So it's never twice the same color necessarily, depending on how you place your orders. But as you can see, I got a pretty quality item here for 42 bucks. So how does that compare with the Shapeways cage? And let's take a look at the Shapeways cage. Taking a look here, I got all three parts down on the table this time. But as we look closer at the left side of the cage, you can definitely see there's more of a finished approach to this. It's textured, very nice, very uniform holes. In fact, honestly, it looks, there's no you know, the artifacts of 3D printing that you tend to get when someone like me makes it or something like that isn't there. Obviously, all the holes are the correct diameter. Let's just do the screw fit test. And this one, even more than that one, the screw just sinks right in there. That's excellent. And of course, let's try PCB guide. Just drop that into the bottom one. And I'm going to snap that in there. And there it is. It's in. So, and they line right up. Let's get that snap back out there without breaking it. And as you can see, that works out very well. Taking a look at the holes in the top, these are uniform, nicely round as they are on the design. And the cutouts for the nuts are excellent. And you can see, again, same textured material all the way around. Very nice finish. The oblong holes on the backplane side. And my logo came out just phenomenal. Look at that. You can almost see that it's a Watford font. That's really nice. And again, on the bottom, very good. And again, these are apples and oranges, but this cage is $300. The other one is $42. So you have to expect some differences. And of course, if I look on the back here, you can see same thing. Nice textured finish on all sides. No gaps or lines. Not even a sign that it's 3D printed. It's very nice and very nicely quality constructed part. Same thing here goes for the right side of the card cage, the PCB guides, and the top here where the top of the cage attaches the nuts The holes for the screws are nice and round. The cutouts for the nuts are excellent. And then looking at the chassis end of this, you can see we've got very nice cutouts for the screws, the nice oblong screws that I made. Same finish. One interesting thing actually I wanted to point out here on the Shapeways cage, you can see this. The support that I put in there, the triangular support, is very nice and smooth, and it's a little different on the other cage. Let me just grab that for a second here. And here in comparison, it looks like it's a 100% infill. It almost looks like it was after the fact. There's a bit of a line there to it, and I don't think it matters. Its job is supportive, so if it does the job, it does the job. But there's definitely, compared to the Shapeways cage, and I noticed this even when I 3D print it, there's a bit of a difference there. And I would say my printer goes somewhere between these two. So for my money, if you're going to buy one of these cages, I don't know that I would spend $300 at Shapeways. I decided to see what it was like. But getting something that's from CraftCloud, you might even do well with the lowest price part, but I probably would step it up a notch. That said, this one is the one that's going in the computer because it cost me a ton of money, and it is very well constructed. It is noticeably heavier than the other part. So that is, and this is their base default material here, so there's nothing fancy here. But it is a high quality item. The top, again, similarly very good. There's no artifact on the top. You can see a nice, that nice coarse finish they've got there. My name is printed out excellently in that nice Tandy font there. I'm just very happy with it, and of course looking at the back, same kind of thing. It's just very high quality part. So there is a degree of you get what you pay for here, but for a part that sits inside the machine, I don't know that I would advise any of you to go and pay this. But if you want a fancy pants one, by all means, go to Shapeways. So this is the cage that's going to be going into the Model 12. But before we do that, we've got to deal with a power connector, because my Model 12, at least, only has the connector for the motherboard. If I take a look over here to the power supply, there is no additional connector for connecting the backplane. And the backplane does have its own power port on there with the same pinout as the motherboard. Now, I'm going to warn you, it's about something right now, and this is super important. Watch those big red words flashing on your screen. If you watch nothing else in this video, for the love of God, watch this. Do not, under any circumstances, use the floppy drive connectors. Never, never, never. Why? Why? Well, I'll tell you why. They may be the same shape. You can plug them in. Some of the same voltages are present. This connector has 5 and 12 volts. Plus 5, plus 12, minus 12. This one's got plus 5, but it also has 24 volts on it. If you plug this into the backplane and you power this machine up with the motherboard connected to its original connector, or even not, you're going to get smoke and just completely destroy one of these machines. Don't do it. Do not. Yes, it reaches. Yes, it reaches. Don't take this and plug it into your backplane or your motherboard. You will be sorry, and you will take a TRS-80 Model 12 out of the world, or at least you'll have a nice big doorstop. Okay, public service announcement over. Okay, so we have to modify this connector, and the way we're going to do that is we're going to make a splitter. Now, full disclosure, for what I can get into the pins crimped myself, this may not be enough for a full complement of cards if you go with everything. We can do some tests down the road. Maybe we'll put the whole complement of cards in and do voltage tests at various levels of the card cage and see if that 5 volts and that 12 volts drops off too much. But it may not support the full complement of cards. Those of you just starting out, or those of you just adding a couple of additional cards, the hard disk controller, maybe the SRAM board, the 8 meg SRAM board, that draws very little current. But you want to be careful here. This may not be enough. It kind of goes to the cooling. There's only so much I can do with the size of the connector and the wiring available to me. So it might be worth considering a harness, reworking the harness, and that's beyond my scope at the moment. But maybe that's a thing that someone will do. These are TE connectors. I've got the crimper for the mate lock pins, and there will be part numbers for these in my video description, and I will probably also include part number information and everything else you need in my GitHub as a little addendum. I'll have a little doc on making this connector. So, gauge of the wire is important here. Pay attention to the next section if you're going to follow along. Before we make our splitter, let's just verify some voltages here. You'll see I have the video card in the 12, connected with the keyboard connector and video connector. Ground's in place. I've added the ground spade back here to ground out the CRT. Again, ground's in place. I have removed the connector from the motherboard. And in taking a look at this connector, note its keying. And this is going to be important. So note that the notch here, the lockout here pin, is right between these two sets of pins. And you can see on the motherboard that it is closer to the video card. This is going to matter later. But what we're going to do is test these out. So the connector connects to the board in this direction. So I'm just going to put that back in. And what you can probably see here, maybe not, is we have an orange conductor closest to me here. Right about there. We have red and we have white. And those are in order: orange plus 12, red plus 5, white minus 12 volts. At least that's what I believe we should be getting. The card cage is expecting those voltages in that order, and let's find out why. So looking at the card cage, you'll notice that the notch is on the bottom end here. Get the camera to focus, and in fact it does expect plus 12, plus 5, and minus 12 in that order, and the right three, I believe, are ground. But we're going to make them one for one anyway in our splitter. We're not going to make any assumptions here. We're going to do it right. So with that in mind, I'm going to fire the machine up. You can see it's together for that reason. We're going to fire it up, and we're going to make sure that the voltages do test out. So with the connector in the motherboard on the right side of the connector, I'm expecting the opposite. I'm expecting this nearest one to me to be plus 12, this one to be plus 5, and the one that you can't see buried under here to be minus 12. If they are correct, then we know we are in fact correct. Now, the service manual would tell you this, of course, but we're here and this is more fun, so let's go. Let's do something that hasn't been done for a while on this Model 12, and we'll just fire it up. Keep my hands away from switches. And there we go. We have an insert diskette prompt on the screen. Obviously no drives connected or anything, so not much is going to happen. Alright, ground lead. I'm going to stick that. Actually, I'm going to use the chassis over here. That's going to be easiest to get the voltages I want. And now I'm going to probe very carefully. So first the orange wire, and there's 12 volts. And we'll do the white next. That's the bottom one. That is minus 12 volts. And let's just, here, I want to watch myself. This is a running machine. And there we go. We have, oop, get it in there. There we are. And we have 5.02 volts. So we have in fact verified that the connector is the correct voltages and in the correct places. And these other three, we should get pretty much nothing. Ground, ground, ground. Okay. Now that we've verified that, let's now go make our connector. Before we get started here, part numbers. There's a lot of parts you need. Connectors, pins, crimper. And so let's take a look. First off, the crimper and die set. You're going to want the TE crimper if you can get a hold of it. Borrow one, whatever you got to do. 354940-1 is the crimper, and then the die set. This is a pin die set 90546-2. There'll be a lot of numbers in the next 35 seconds or so. And then here we have the female connector. This goes into the motherboard of the machine and the backplane as seen here. And that is part number 1-480270-0. And then we have the male connector. This connects to the Model 12 harness. You're going to need one of these and two of these. And that part number is 1-480271-0. Easy peasy there. And then for the connectors, you're going to need female pins for the female side of the connector here. And that is part number 350550-1. And then the male connectors, I'm using part number 1062-16-1422. And there is a larger pin available, but they don't fit in this connector. So if you want to use this particular connector, this is the one I could find that wasn't a board surface mount. You need these pins. I don't remember, I have to look at the spec sheet, if these pins support, officially support 14 gauge wire, but it did easily fit in there without taking any strands out, crimped right down very nicely. So I'm not going to worry about it too much. I did a test crimp on it and everything was fine. Okay, let's make this thing and then we'll try it out. Welcome to the bench. We're going to make ourselves a cable, and I've already pre-cut a bunch of lengths of wire. We have 6 total conductors that we're going to have to split. So we need 1 to connect to the original connector, and then we need 2 to go to each of the new ones. All of the wires that are not the 5-volt wire are 16 gauge to my to my view. As best I can see, they appear to be 16 gauge. If they are wrong, the correct number is on the screen. The 5-volt wire, as you noted, was bigger, and the power connector is 14 gauge. So the plan here is I'm going to attach the remaining pins to each of these conductors here. We've got 4 left. Then I'm going to strip away the ends here and on each of these, and we're going to twist them all together and we're going to solder them. And I'm actually going to solder, by the way, the ends on these. I like to double it up with soldering. This just lessens the chance of anything coming out. We are then going to use some heat shrink tubing to cover up the splits, and then we're going to attach the final set of pins onto each of the other ends. And at that point, we'll go back into the other room and we'll line these up and insert them into the various connectors here. So we've got quite a project in front of us, but this shouldn't be too difficult. We should be able to get this done relatively easily. So I think that's all there is. Let's get right to it. And there's our finished product. So we have, and we'll double check it against the Model 2's power connector, that looking at the way this goes, I'm just going to try it out on the backplane here. My orange was my plus 12, my plus 5, and my minus 12. And those are on the same. And then I did match up the ground, so each of these 3 goes to the corresponding exact same pin, just to be sure. And they do all connect together on the back of the backplane, so I'm sure it doesn't matter that much, but I am a perfectionist at times, to a fault, and that can be an issue. So this should be set to try. I'm going to take a look and compare this to the Model 12 real quick, and then it's going to be time to assemble the card cage and try it out. And back at the Model 12, here's an easy way to figure this out without powering it up. I should be able to line this up without connecting it all the way, and the wire colors should all line up. And of course I substituted blue for white, but we have orange, orange, red, red, and I got the correct gauge on there. And then on the other side we have the grounds. And at the same time, I should be able, with these at the same orientation, hobbying the same, I should be able to hold these at the same orientation and see that the colors do in fact line up. And I've got the locks in the right place. So I'm confident that this connector will at least not smoke the machine. And with that, it is now time to assemble the card cage. I'm going to show you how to do that. We're going back to the bench. And then once we're done with that, we're going to power this up and try it out. How cool is this? This project is about done. Welcome to the assembly portion of our show. You'll need a backplane, a recently 3D printed TJB Chris card cage. Note that when I say, again, left and right sides, I'm describing these as though I were facing the back of the Model 12. So the left side, of course, floppy drive side, right side, CRT driver side, and again, the top is the top. So, pretty good. Highly recommend a set of clamps. I'm going to warn you now, this gets a little tight for fingers. I'm going to apologize in advance. There's not much I can do about that, but you can try and make it easier on yourself, and that's what we're going to try and do today. But the clamps come in real handy for this because it will make it a little easier for you. So what I would suggest you do is try and line up the holes a little bit. You can adjust the clamps as you need to, but just clamp this down, and that gives you, even one clamp will probably do it. And that just gives you an easier way to get a screw through there and get the nuts tied in. You only need to get a couple in, and everything will hold itself. Now again, don't tighten things all the way. You can command it either way. You can do the screw through the back of the plane here. Let's turn this way. And do that. Or you can run the screw through the front and tighten the nuts on the back. Whichever you prefer. The latter might be easier for fingers, but I'm going to do it this way because I like to use the screwdriver on the back without jamming it in the card cage when I go to adjust it later. So now that I have my first screw in, I'm just going to screw this down, and then we can get started on the remainder. Okay, let's move my clamp to the other side here. This just gives me some additional rigidity while I'm holding it together. But seriously, clamps will make your life much, much easier, and they give you just enough bite that you can do exactly as I'm doing now. If I can get it, oh, I got it in the wrong hole. There we go. And if you want, another thing that makes it a little easier, use a longer screw and then trim it at the end. Okay, now with 2 of the screws in, I can put the remaining 2 in. Let's do that. All right, this is attached, but it has some movement, and that's intentional, so I can adjust it. Before I get on to the second part, I'm going to install the card guides, and these should snap in. They'll be hard. You're going to want to push them good. Make sure they go all the way down in seat, and once they're in place, you can move on to the other side, put those in before you attach it to the backplane. And you could have put these on first. I got ahead of myself and didn't, but you could put these on first. But either way, it's not too difficult. And if you find you need a little more force on it, just give it the back of a screwdriver. And just give it a little force, you know, push on the handle if it hurts your fingers. But that's that. All right, let's put the slots and the PCB guides on this side, and then we'll attach it. And there we are. All in. I'll say this, with a Shapeways cage, these snapped in real nice. They're nice and snug. Now, optionally, if you want to apply some glue here, this would be the time to do it. Just go along the top and bottom with a little bit of glue. Make sure whatever you use is safe for the material used to print. Now, to attach the other side of the cage. Once again, our friend the clamp will come in very handy. Just try and line it up a little bit. And it doesn't have to be perfect, because what you're going to do is move this up and down as you need with the clamp in place. I went down too low on that. And again, once you line up one of the holes and screw it through, you're good. So now I've got that. Let's just drop a screw through here and we'll get it in place. And again, clamps are not, you can get these at any big box store, one of those color themed ones, or your local hardware store should you choose. Screw in, we'll do the bottom here. That'll give me enough rigidity that I can just kind of use this. And again, don't tighten them all the way down, but get them, you know, snug enough to hold it together so it doesn't collapse on you. But that's all you really need to do. Now to install the top, again, you're not going to tighten it all the way down. I find it's easiest card cage on its back. I just dropped a screw. And what you're going to want to do is just line it right up like this, because this will be easier to get the screw through here. Drop it through the hole on the top of the cage, and then screw it down. And rinse, lather, repeat 3 more times. Don't tighten it all the way again, so you can do some adjustments, but this will complete the assembly of the card cage. All right, it's time to do the initial fit and tighten. And the thing you're going to want to make sure, at least get the bottom one as good as you can, because once it's in the machine, you're not going to be able to adjust it. So take the video card here, which should already be taken out of your Model 12. Line it up with the slot here. And now, with the card in place, you should be able to tighten down those 2 screws. Make sure there's a little slack in there so that the card cage can kind of work here, but careful not to over tighten. And if you're using nylon screws, you can mess up the screws. I'm just kind of pushing the cage in toward itself. Now let's make sure I didn't overdo it. Nope, slides in and out, but is in good shape. Okay. And you will have a little flex here because this isn't in the chassis, so what you're really worried about is the descent, but it slides nicely in. We're in pretty good shape. Let's try the top slot. If I can line it up. There we go. And that's just a little bit off, and this is where the top can actually help you out. Let's just loosen that a bit. I had that a little too tight. That's better. And we'll tighten that up. Okay, let's test fit the remaining slots. Lines right up. And if you have problems or having a hard time trimming it out, just make sure you have your PCB guides slid all the way into their holes. Don't be afraid to give them a little nudge with something. All right, I'm going to put that in the middle. And we're going to tighten down the remaining screws that I can get to here. And there we are. Everything should be it. One last little test fit here. Just make sure the bottom slot and the top slot are good. If they're good, we should be in good shape. And I think we're going to be in good shape. And the top. Excellent. Nice, easy slide. Glides right in and out, lines up with the slot. Now it's time to go through the installation portion of our show. Let's get this in. All right, folks, your very first order of business will be to take some of the nuts, or the screws that you've taken, the screws that you've taken from the previous cage assembly that was in your Model 12, and pre-drive them into the side of the cage just a little bit. Do it for all 3. The middle screw should be the easiest because there's a ground there, at least on my system. And you're going to want to take into account that ground, by the way, when you're putting that in. So make sure you get the ground in. But you're going to want to pre-drive those because these turn a little hard, and it's going to be a lot more difficult for you to get those screws in with the card cage in place. So let's get that middle one in there, and we'll get to the next side. All right, I've got my ground here. And I'm just going to slide that in. Just a little bit. Okay, there we go. Ground's in place. You should be able to get the cage around it. You may find it a little bit finicky. If you really have to, you could run the ground on the outside of the thing, but I'm going to try. Actually, you can go up against the chassis with it. If you have to and leave that screw out, you can make sure all of your cabling and such is out of the way. Disconnect your power harness if you haven't already. Make sure that's disconnected and off to the side because you're going to need it. And actually, this is a good time also to run and install your new power harness. I'm going to drop the power harness in here because you want to do this before you run it, so just make sure that your wires are good. And you want one of your connectors here just in like that. I'm going to give these wires a pre-bend without putting too much stress on the connector and slide it in just like so. And we're in. I'm going to run that right up there and we'll come visit you later. Run you right into there. Cool. All right. And we should be in. Okay. Just make sure you're in snug. Okay, don't put too much force on the board. Okay, let's try and install this. I'm going to line this up with the slot here. And see if I can get my ground to play nice. Oh, actually, that looks like it's going to kind of play nice. Let's get that in there. And we're in. So I'm going to tighten down these 3 screws, and then we're going to install the fan. Well, actually, we'll install the right side screws, and then we'll install the fan. All right, and now I'm going to attempt. I've designed this with the hopes that you can slide this in. If the screw's not long enough, the newer version of the cage, actually, after I sent this off to Shapeways, actually has an indentation for this purpose. That's what it's for. So that you should be able, although I think I'm going to get it anyway, you should be able to drive the ground screw or drive it in with the ground against the chassis, which is preferred. Okay, we're installed. All screws are in place. I got my ground lug there. I did have to Dremel this just a bit because I didn't have the indentation I added later. But we'll do one more card fit test. This fits great. This fits great. All right, let's install the fan. So the way to do this is actually pretty straightforward. Just grab a couple of these screws, get them ready here. And what you're going to want to do is make sure there's an airflow arrow, that it is pointing outside of the cage. And then just pre-run a couple of these screws through and attach the fan. And it should run all the way through. And actually what you can do is just get the first nut on there, just enough to hold the fan up for you. And with these factory screws in this fan, it just barely reaches, but it does in fact reach. So now I'm just going to slide this in there, get my fat head out of the way, and that goes in there. Easy peasy. All right, the fan's installed. Now, you may find that depending on the thickness of the material, the exact thickness, the screws may not quite reach all the way through. You have a couple of options. You can pick up a shorter set and matching nuts at your local color-themed hardware store or otherwise, or you could run the nut, hold it back up here, and thread it the entire way. And that would hold the fan up to the cage. So, I mean, that's a way you can do it without having to go out and buy new parts. And then just the edges of the screw holes would hang out the end here a little bit. Either works. If you're uncomfortable with this, think it's not going to stay, whatnot, I would recommend threading the nut back here. But I was able to get this one in. So now we have to attach our power connector and get our video card installed. Alrighty, next step, power connector. So this just lines right up with the back of the backplane. I'm just going to insert it. And it should go right in. And there we are. We are in fact connected. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm actually going to tuck it down the side here. And that will keep it out of the way of any other parts and try and keep it routed around any other cables or anything like that. You can also actually run part of it up through the connector here if you like. But either way, this is the CRT power. I'm going to move it back here. And I'm going to connect this just like this. And there we are. It should give you a nice click. And actually, I'm going to undo that. I'm going to run it under the power switch connect cable. That will make it a little nicer. And there we go. That should keep it all nice and out of the way. Out of the way of the various knobs and things. Double check that your wire colors line up. Orange to orange, red to red, white to white or blue. And then your ground should be all connected. And now what we should have here is a nice firm connection. So we just have to do grounds now. All right, one other thing we have to take care of is grounding. So because my card cage is not made of metal, and the Tandy one is. The Tandy one has a couple of ground spades attached to the back, and of course the entire chassis is grounded. So the video and keyboard connectors can have their ground cables attached to those fins that are there. My cage doesn't have that, so being PLA. So I'm going to have to make my own harness that I can then use to ground the various connectors. And then I'm going to use a little heat shrink tubing here. You will want to make sure these aren't just floating around in the machine when you're done. So let's make the harness. I'm going to solder, crimp and solder. All right, so I've left my ground spade here. I'm just going to attach you. And I'm going to try to attach you, assuming I can. There we go. Okay, we got a nice solid ground. And then here I have the keyboard cable, which I actually have to unroute from this holder here because it now comes the other way. So we're going to want to route that around the back of the machine. I'm actually going to use this power cord, the former connector for the power cable here. That should hold this in. And now we're going to want to do something with these because you don't want just metal floating about. So I'm probably going to wrap these in electrical tape once I get them in. There we go. Okay, let's install the video card into the... I'm going to put it in the next to the bottom slot because I actually have another card that's going to go into this that needs to be first in the chain. And it should just kind of... And it snaps in. Oh, look at this. This looks phenomenal. All right. And then we need to attach this right here to the video connector. You'll note you might need to do a little finagling with the wire here to make sure that it stays in place. And again, be careful of the floating grounds. We will deal with that momentarily. Let's get the side up on here though. Before we do that, I need to do a smoke test. And we're going to hope, upon hopes, that I did not just destroy this machine and powering it on in a minute, and we'll see how it goes. But for now, oh, you know what I realized? I have one too few grounds. That's easy enough to fix. I'm just going to nip this. We're going to solder a pair onto the end of it here, and we'll fix that. Let's do that and come right back. All right, revised harness with an additional bit here. Again, I got it all nice and wrapped here. I even ran the terminal back the other way so that it would be a little easier for the CRT to connect to. Now, let's try this. I'm going to attach you again, and I'm going to attach you to my backward-facing connector. I'm probably going to tape these. That's going to need a little tightening down. Let's move you in a little bit. But I'm going to want to tape these because I don't want the metal floating around. It would be bad. And probably all you're getting is my stupid hairy arms. Okay. But with the grounds outside of the machine, we can at least test this out. So we have all of our connectors up. We have everything in place. I'm going to make sure that this is off. I'm going to plug it in, and hopefully in misdoing the ground thing here, folks, I mean, that's nothing, things don't go perfectly on this channel. They go better than I expect them to half the time, but they don't go perfectly. All right, this is one last sanity check. I need to make sure that I am happy with how this is. So I've triple checked this harness, and I see the connector wires. This is 12, 5, and minus 12. I'm going to go over and check the other side and make sure that the colors all line up, because if they all line up, then at least I won't send the wrong voltage to the wrong place. And I see red to red, orange to orange, white to blue, which is white, and then the 3 grounds. So I think we are happy. And with this in, this will be the Model 12's first power-up with the correct card cage installed. Hopefully it works. Here we go. We don't have any smoke, and let's take a look around at the other side and see what the machine says. And it says insert diskette. That's it. The Model 12 works. It now has my newly installed TJB Chris design card cage chassis, currently using the Tandy backplane, but the system is in fact operational. Let's go back around back, move my tripod here, and take a look at a thing of beauty. Is a joy forever, and this is really in good shape. I'm really happy with it. It came out very nicely. The cage works. It lines up. The backplane that I got from eBay works, but of course this will probably be a Tandy Emeritus backplane someday. Let's get this machine back together and we'll try it out. Just so you didn't think I forgot, I did tape just one wrap of electrical tape around it to make sure I don't have these, because metal floating around will be bad, and this will help keep them together too. So that's there. I don't expect these to really come undone very much, because if the video card comes out, I can just disconnect it and the grounds can stay connected. So that's where we are. All right, now let's get this thing back together. Woohoo! And here it is, all put back together. We're looking at it from the back, of course, because this is where all the fun and action has been this whole time. And you can see in there the card cage lines up real nice. It fits excellently. You've got pretty good room to work in there. It is, in fact, in very good shape. And I can see my power connector down there holding down the fort, splitting power both ways. Down the road, when I go to add more cards to this, I think I'm going to want to do a load test on it again. I mean, you have to kind of trim out these power supplies anyway if you add cards. You can't just throw them in and leave them. So we'll check that, and if we need to, we'll revisit the harness situation. But for a pair of cards, the same gauge wire with the harness I've used looks like it's going to work. We'll find out as we use the machine. So let's give this thing a spin. I got the Floppy emulator connected. We're going to power it up and see what happens here. Make sure I got my card out. Pop it on. Should get insert diskette prompt. It seeks. And let's take her for a spin. And today is 12/28/2023, and it is 13:58. Machine seems to be working quite beautifully. I'm going to exit from system here. We don't need to go to teleterm. Just go to basic. And I'm going to say 10 print. The Model 12 is now unneutered. Hello, you rummy buzzards. Oop, 20, go to 10, but I have to edit 10 because I need to put on the closing quote or I'm going to get a syntax error. There we go, run. And there we are. The Model 12 is now unneutered. Hello, you rummy buzzards. And that's going to do it for part 4 in my series and for the series for now. There will be a part 5 sometime down the road when I get my hands on the TE backplane, and we'll talk about some of the differences between the Tandy backplane assembly and the one that the TE is making. There are some differences. It's going to be a very nice project. But until that happens, and that's probably going to be months from now by the time I get to it, this is where the Model 12 sits. It's unneutered using the Tandy backplane and a card cage designed by yours truly, TJB Chris. So there you go. I hope it's useful to any of you who happen to come across a backplane or as the TE backplanes come into fashion down the road. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time.